Hey everybody, it's Nathaniel Avila reporting from Dallas County, and who am I here with?
Hey, it's on you.
Hello. And what are we talking about today?
We're talking about the Lost Cosmonauts.
Yes. What do you know about the Lost Cosmonauts?
Oh, things that happen with space, Cold War, just little bits and pieces there that I came up with research on.
Okay. Well, the Lost Cosmonauts are subjects of a conspiracy theory alleging that some Soviet cosmonauts went to outer space, but their existence has never been publicly acknowledged by either the Soviet or Russian space authorities. So that's pretty much the gist of it. So let's get into the story of what these allegations are. So we're going to go back in time, all the way back in December 1959. An alleged high-ranking Czechoslovakian communist leaked information about many purported unofficial space shots. Alexei Ladovsky was mentioned as being launched inside a converted R-5A rocket. Three more names of alleged cosmonauts claimed to have perished under similar circumstances were Andrei Mitkov, Sergei Shibarin, and Maria Granova. So I heard you do a little snicker there. What are you thinking?
I know, just, when leaks happened and information always ends up being, nope, I don't know what you're talking about. Those people never existed. We have no record of them.
But this is the Soviet Union we're talking about. They're notorious of deleting people that they don't want to be known.
Of course.
Mm-hmm.
If they don't do anything that is in the right for Mother Russia,
Okay.
they do not exist.
Yeah. So in December 1959, the Italian news agency Continental repeated the claims that a series of cosmonaut deaths in suborbital flight have been revealed by a high-ranking Czechoslovakian communist. Continentale identified the cosmonauts as Alexei Ladovsky, Serenity Shriborin, Andrei Mitkov, and Maria Gromova, and no other evidence of Soviet suborbital crewed flights ever came to light. So this is the only bit of anybody citing of such an event happening.
Only sighting, only records, and let's see. Question: is the person that leaked this information still alive?
Well, we leaked it in 1959, so I doubt it. Battery's really old.
Hey, people live to being 107, 109 now.
Yeah.
I mean, it is not necessarily a possibility.
Yeah. Whoever leaked this beat of information actually went unnamed, so we don't know who this person is.
Probably the smartest thing they ever did.
Mm-hmm.
And they would only be 62 if they were still alive.
Okay. Wait, what are you calculating?
This year to 1959?
Yeah, you think they leaked this when they were 1?
I mean, to be honest, so if that's the case, then they're probably in their late 70s, 80s, which,
yeah.
I mean, there's lots of people still in that range. I mean, just a couple of days ago, I met a World War II veteran. Poor thing. Jeez. I feel like you just want to be put out of your misery.
Jeez.
Anyway,
it must be like 100.
But it does not necessarily mean you cannot still be alive. Anyway, so if that's the only information and they didn't report their name, which is probably the smartest thing if you live in Soviet Union or some of the other countries, that if you do not do right by them, they execute you.
Oh yeah.
And To be honest, I wouldn't want to be executed, so I would leak it and make sure I have lots of loopholes if they tried to go through other back doors to try to figure out who I am.
I mean, I think Russia executes people to this day if they don't like what they're doing.
Oh yeah, and I mean they won't execute foreigners, but I've also heard that if you take pictures or have video of something they do not like, they will confiscate the phone and remove said stuff.
Yeah, and then they'll
from
punch
your
you in
phone,
the face.
if they give your phone back at all.
Yeah. And then they'll punch you in the face.
Maybe.
So in 1959 edition of Oganoik published an article and photos of 3 high-altitude parachutists, Colonel Pyotr Dolgov, Ivan Kuchor, and Alexei Grachov. Official records state that Dolgov was killed on November 1st, 1962, while carrying out high-altitude parachute jump from a Volga balloon gondola. Dolgov, huh?
No, keep going.
So, Dolgov jumped at an altitude of 93,960 feet. The helmet visor of Dolgov's Sokol spacesuit hit part of the gondola as he exited, depressurizing the suit and killing him. So, yeah, that's what happened to him, or at least that's the official story. So, what do you think about that?
Official, yes.
What do you think? You think he was sent out to space, but then died in space, and not from some balloon gondola?
It could go either way. I mean, if you're trying to make sure humans can go and survive somewhere, you send people. But especially, in that time frame, back in those days, the whole space war that we're not having right now. Well, I'm sorry. We as a country are not having right now, but the people that can afford it are.
So, yeah. So, Kachor is known to have disappeared around this time, and his name has become linked to this equipment. So, Grachov is thought to have been involved. With Dolgov and Kachor in testing the high-altitude equipment, Russian journalist Yaroslav Golovanov let me try that again. Yaroslav Golovanov suggested that high-altitude testing was exaggerated into a story that those parachutists died in a spaceflight. In late 1959, Ogoniak carried pictures of a man identified as Gennady Zavadovsky testing high-altitude equipment, perhaps with Grachov and others, maybe. I don't know. Zavadovsky would later appear on lists of dead cosmonauts without a date of death or accident description. Things are getting a little fishy. So what do you think? What about these other guys? They're saying that it's just heavily exaggerated, but then all of a sudden you see their names on lists of dead cosmonauts, but they don't have a date or a death description. What does that tell you?
It tells me, to an extent, that, like any good Star Trek fan knows, means that they probably went way more than they were expected to go and never showed back up in the time that they were allotted to. And so they can't really say they're dead or not, but they can't say... It's one of those... some of those Star Trek episodes where they go to a planet and all these people are from different time frames and they just appeared out of nowhere. It kind of goes one of those things. You send people to go and investigate something and you expect them to come back maybe in a week, but when it's been several months and people start asking questions, then you either try to figure out by faking their death in the gondola situation, or you just not answer questions and saying, they're dead. That's all.
Okay.
But how did they die? When did they die? They're just dead. That's all you need to know. This is Mother Russia. No more. Get out.
That's a great Russian accent.
Da, thank you.
Okay.
Spasiba.
Yeah. So we're going to go on to 1960, where science fiction author Robert A. Heinlein wrote in his article Pravda Means Truth, which has then been reprinted into an article collection called Expanded Universe, that on May 15th, 1960, while traveling in Vilnius in the Soviet Lithuania, he was told by Red Army cadets that the Soviet Union had launched a human into orbit that day. But later the same day, it was denied by officials. So Heinlein speculated that Korabel Sputnik 1 was an orbital launch, later said to be uncrewed, and that the retro rockets had fired in the wrong attitude, making recovery efforts unsuccessful. So now we're having a thing with this guy, the science fiction author, who said that he was visiting Lithuania, and he was told by army officials or army cadets that the Soviet Union launched a person into orbit, but then the higher ups said, no, that's not true. What are we thinking there?
Well, as someone who may or may not have been a cadet themselves, you hear things that end up being official. You're told to keep it hush-hush, but I mean, what harm does one person do? But you don't know who that person is. Maybe drunken night, and you just say, yeah, we helped launch a spacecraft that was manned. It was awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, and these were cadets, so it wouldn't be that outside the realm of possibility that they could just have been mistaken.
It's a possibility to be mistaken, but most of the time, when you experience something of such awness, it stays with you, and alcohol is really a good loose lipper.
Yeah, and this is also Soviet Union, so they do like the vodka.
Vodka is not just vodka. Vodka is water. It's the lifeblood.
It's the lifeblood?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. So, according to Gagarin's biography, these rumors were likely started as a result of two Vostok missions equipped with dummies, who is known as Ivan Ivanovich, and human voice tape recordings to test that the radio worked, that were made just prior to Gagarin's flight. So that is what they might have been referring to, was just this dummy and a recording of like tape recordings. So that's what this guy's getting at. So in a U.S. press conference in February 23rd, 1962, Colonel Barney Oldfeld revealed that an uncrewed space capsule had indeed been orbiting the Earth since 1960, as it had become jammed into its booster rocket. According to NASA NSDC Master Catalog, Korabel Sputnik 1, designated at the time 1KP or Vostok 1P, did launch on May 15, 1960, 1 year before Gagarin. It was a prototype that later Zenit and Vostok launch vehicles, the onboard TDU, which is called the braking engine unit, had ordered the retro rockets to fire to recover. But due to a malfunction of the altitude control system, the spacecraft was oriented upside down, and the firing put the craft into a higher orbit. The re-entry capsule lacked the heat shields that were no plans to recover it. Engineers had planned to use the vessel's telemetry data to determine if the guidance system had functioned correctly, so recover recovery was unnecessary. So now we got this whole thing saying that it was brought into space and it was never even attempted to be brought back. This little vehicle, but it was considered to be uncrewed. So what are we thinking here?
Well, I mean, several of us, or some people that's actually into space and all that, who actually kind of wanted to learn and become astronauts in their time, and then they learned math happened and all that BS. And it doubts your dreams. Anyway, those who do know, I mean, most of us do know about Sputnik 1 being up there. So, I mean, I wouldn't put it past to be like, what do you mean? It's just that one thing up there. It couldn't possibly be anything else. We would never just send people up or send probes without everyone knowing that we're sending it.
Mm-hmm. And what do you think about that whole, like, them, that the Gagarin was being, like, shot up with just a dummy in it? And that's probably where these Red Army cadets got that they launched a human into space.
I mean, it's a possibility. I mean, sometimes when you're with people of impressionable age that still have more to learn, you sometimes tell them stories that aren't fully true.
Okay. So you're thinking it was just for them? It was also like a cover up, that they were implanted, like what they wanted was to be, what they wanted them to know, in order for them to not know the truth.
I mean, it is the Soviet Union.
Mm-hmm. So we're going to move on to the Giudica Cardiglia brothers, who are two Italian former amateur radio operators who made radio recordings which allegedly support the conspiracy theory that the Soviet space program covered up the cosmonaut deaths in the 1960s. The pair claim to have recorded several failed secret Soviet space missions that ended. The recordings have been the center of public interest for more than 50 years, but also dispute. So now we're having these recordings by these two Italian brothers, but we can't verify if they're real or not. So there goes that. So Major General Vladimir Sergeyevich Ilyushin was a Soviet general and test pilot and the son of aerospace engineer Sergei Ilyushin. He spent most of his career as a test pilot for the Sukhoi OKB, which is a revival of the Ilyushin OKB. So the Ilyushin was also a rugby union administrator who was inducted into the World Rugby Hall of Fame, then known as the IRB Hall of Fame in 2013. So 2 days before Gagarin's launch in April 12th, 1961, Denis Ogden wrote in the Western Communist newspaper The Daily Worker that the Soviet Union's announcement that Ilyushin had been involved in a serious car crash was really a cover story for an April 7, 1961 orbital spaceflight gone wrong. A similar story was told by French broadcaster Edouard Bobrovsky, but his version had the launch occurring in March, resulted in Ilyushin slipping into a coma. NORAD tracking stations, however, had no record of any such launch. Okay, so what are we thinking about this whole thing?
I find it interesting that a French broadcaster has such an interesting un-French last name.
Definitely very, very suspicious.
I mean, the only way you would get any way close to that is if you have relatives that your parents married into, and your last name upon birth is closer to Russian instead of French.
Mm-hmm. So do you think that Bobrovsky, the French broadcaster, is right in his thing, that Ilyushin was just slipped into a coma?
Not necessarily. I mean, both of these are saying the same person either died in a car crash or went into a coma, or, I'm sorry, he's alive and well, so we have no idea what you're talking about. But it's the same name. Why?
Things are getting fishy. And also, NORAD said that they didn't record any launch that anyone was brought into space. So it.
Of course not. We would never launch anything. Launching takes too much of the civilians' money for our programs. Would you want to launch things without everyone knowing? It's a proud day in the Soviet Union. You want everyone to know that we have launched something in space.
Right. So later that year, U.S. News and World Report transmitted the rumor by claiming that Gagarin had never flown and was merely a stand-in for the sickened Ilyushin. The 1999 film The Cosmonaut Cover-Up takes the position that Ilyushin was the first man in space and discusses the alleged cover-up in detail. They claim, according to recently declassified documents, Ilyushin was placed in a capsule named Rossiya, and the secret flight took place in the early hours of the morning on Friday, April 7th, 1961. After a guidance malfunction, the cosmonaut is reported to have made an unguided crash, landing in China, too critically injured to announce the mission was a complete success. In 2009, the 2009 film Fallen Idol also takes the same position and further discusses the U.S. efforts to continue the allegation, even citing national security not to release information under the Freedom of Information Act. The data sought was from the CIA tracking station at Turn Island that supposedly covered and recorded Ilyushin's failed mission. So, are you believing these documentaries?
I mean, they're conspiracy documentaries, to say the least, but isn't a little bit everything. But, I mean, to be honest, if it was successful, but you landed in another communist foreign country unannounced, you're dead. So
I don't know. I mean, if you like back in the day, like Soviet Union and China were very tight. They were like homies. Like if you ever looked at like Soviet Union and Chinese propaganda posters, you can see that they were like really close. Like they really had a huge, strong bond. So if they did land in China, I don't think he would have been killed. I think he would have just been sent back.
There might have been several questions because, I mean, even if they were really tight with each other. So, did you not want to tell us that you were heading to space? We would have sent someone there to help. It's one of those, you scratch my back, I scratch yours. What happened?
Yeah, that would be some tough questions to answer. And then, so yeah, and also they were saying like recently declassified documents. They never said what the declassified documents were. So I guess we'll never know. I don't know what they're talking about. So, according to Mark Wade, editor of the space history website Encyclopedia Astronautica, the entire early history of the Soviet manned space program has been declassified, and we have piles of memoirs of cosmonauts, engineers, etc. who participated. We know who was in the original cosmonaut team, who never flew, was dismissed, or was killed in ground tests. Ilyushin is not one of them. So there we go. So there it is. Yep. Disproven. Debunked.
Well, for that name, but how about the other ones that we heard about at the beginning? What was the name? Was Ivan Koshar, Alexa Grodovich? Were those names in the documents also? Or were they no longer there either?
I don't know. Maybe. I guess we'll never know. We still have no idea about those guys.
So it can't be fully debunked if some of the names that had no date or cause of death is not in those documents that they did or did not go.
Yeah.
Because even if those are good, governments always like to have an extra secret vault just in case.
Oh, yeah. Just in case. So, the Soviet Union lost the crewed moon landing phase of the space race in the United States, which is the only one, which is like the finish line of the space race, which was the moon landing. So,
yeah.
However, some sources claim that just before the historic Apollo 11 flight to the moon, the Soviets undertook an adventurous attempt to beat the Americans, despite the unsuccessful first launch of the new Soviet N-1 rocket on January 20th, 1969. What were we going to say?
No, space race, that's always the thing.
So it is alleged that a decision was made to send a crewed Soyuz 7K-7L3 craft to the moon using an N-1. This attempt was alleged to have occurred on July 3rd, 1969. When it ended in an explosion, destroying the launch pad and killing the cosmonauts on board. Official sources state that the L-3 was not ready for crewed missions. Its lunar lander, the LK, had been tested a few times, but its orbiter, the 7K LOK, had not been successfully tested by the closing of the moon landing program at the end of 1974. The closing of the program was officially denied and maintained top secret until 1990, when the government allowed them to be published under the policy of glasnost. So this claim correlates with the late hoax about the unsuccessful moonshot flight of Andrei Mikoyan. However, in reality, the second launch, like the first, was a test of the booster and was therefore uncrewed. Even if cosmonauts had been on board, they would have been rescued by its launch escape system, which carried the dummy payload to safety 1.2 miles from the pad. So, what are we thinking about this whole moonshot thing?
This one, I unfortunately think that it was probably manned. They just don't want to say it was manned because the loss of life is always the hardest portion of some of your best people to want to send in space. Because with the space race, before Apollo 11 even got there, we had so many explosions with actual astronauts in it that didn't make it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Just to try to beat another country out into space.
Yeah.
So I would say this is probably more on the true side, that they probably did try to launch it without it fully being ready, just to try to get a step ahead of, unfortunately, Americans.
Yeah, I would totally believe that. Yeah, because I know that in the space race, optics was everything, and the Soviet Union really cared about what the world thought about them. So, and if any any small thing that would ever be anything bad would happen in the Soviet Union, they would just deny it and say it just never happened. So they wouldn't be perceived as flawed in any way. So I can definitely believe that if that was the case. So we're gonna go back in time, back to 1959. A pioneering space theoretician, Hermann Oberth, claimed that a pilot had been killed in suborbital ballistic flight from Kapustin Yar in early 1958. He provided no source for the story, though. So there are also rumors which appeared later in Omen Ra, a novel by Russian fiction writer Pevelin, that the Soviet automatic sample return craft Luna and remote-controlled automatic moon rover Lunokhod were due to failures in automation, crewed by cosmonauts who had agreed to take part in suicide missions. However, There's not enough space on either the Luna or the Lunokhod for a single cosmonaut. Even excluding any life support systems, there had been a plan to develop modified Lunokods with additional controls for use as a transport in crewed moon landing missions, but this plan ended with the Soviet crewed lunar programs. So what are we thinking about this whole thing? This Oberth guy claimed that a pilot had been killed in an orbital ballistic flight, but there was no source for this.
Well, when there is no source, it's just he said, she said.
Mm-hmm. And then we also have this this novel that appears to be using like these rumors as basis for their story, but I wouldn't say a novel as fact.
Well, I mean, fiction novels, any names, places, or things that seem similar, it is just coincidence. We do not own any of that.
Mm-hmm. So we're going to go into the things that we know to be hoaxes. So, officially, Soyuz 2 was an uncrewed spacecraft that was docking target for Soyuz 3. However, Mike Arena, an American journalist, allegedly found in 1993 that an Ivan Istochinovich and his dog Klocka, who were manning the Soyuz 2, disappeared on October 26, 1968, with signs of having been hit by a meteorite. They had been erased from history by Soviet authorities who could not tolerate such a failure. So that is a thing that we know to be true. This really did happen. That has been confirmed. So what do we think about that?
I mean, if it's been confirmed and there's records of it, then truth is truth. You can't hide the actual records. I mean, the only thing that could possibly is if the records have been forged to say they're full records. But most people believe when they actually see the paperwork that it's true. Mm-hmm. This is what happened. We all believe it.
Yeah. But the entire story was found out to be a hoax perpetrated by Joan Font Caberta. So yeah, that whole thing was actually not true. You have been pranked.
No. My sensibilities of conspiracy theories.
Yeah.
No.
So this person did it as a modern art exercise that included falsified mission artifacts, various digitally manipulated images, and immensely detailed feature-length biographies that turned out to be riddled with hundreds of historical as well as technical errors. The exhibit was shown in Madrid in 1997 and the National Museum of Catalan Art in 1998. Brown University later purchased several articles and put them into display themselves. Mexico's Luna Cornea magazine, however, failed to notice this and ran issue number 14 with photos and history explaining the truth. The truth. So, several lines of evidence available since the first exhibition of Sputnik in 1997 in Madrid suggested that the story and artifacts form an elaborate hoax, such as the name Ivan Istochnikov is a Russian translation of Joan Font Caberta's name. In specific, Joan and Ivan both translate to John, and Font Caberta and Istochnikov both mean hidden fountain. So the photographs of Istochnikov show Font Caberta's face, and the pages of the official website of the Madrid exhibition contain the words "pure fiction" toward the top of each page in a light red and a dark red background, or light pink text on a white background. So in the front and rear end papers of the catalog accompanying the Madrid exhibition have the words "It's all fiction" in Russian and Spanish printed on them using glow-in-the-dark ink. So, so at the website of the Spanish newspaper El Mundo, the third of 3 pages concerning the Madrid exhibition states that the report, which we published in the previous pages, is a product of his, meaning Fontcaberta's, imagination. So that's the whole thing with Istashnikov. So let's go to this other guy, Andrei Mikoyan, who was reportedly killed together with a second crew in an attempt to reach the moon ahead of the Americans in early 1969. Due to system malfunction, they failed to get into the lunar orbit and shot past the moon. So this story, which circulated in 2000, may have been based on the plot of an episode of the television series The Cape. So the episode, Buried in Peace, first aired on October 28th, 1996. In it, a space shuttle on a mission to repair a communication satellites encounters a derelict Soviet spacecraft with a dead crew. The result of a secret attempt to beat the United States to the moon in the 1960s. Tom Novinky played Major Andrei Mikoyan, a Russian member of the space shuttle crew in the story. So yeah, so this guy was just a character on this TV show.
Always TV shows, aren't we so happy about that?
Mm-hmm. So yeah, this whole thing was just a plot of an episode of The Cape. So we're going to go on to this other stuff, like in May 1987, issue 121 of Dragon magazine features Operation Zodiac, an article by Marie M. Rasmussen, creator of the top secret role-playing game Jackie Rasmussen and Roger E. Moore, a follow-on to Operation Zenith, which appeared in issue 120. So this includes a scenario codenamed Cancer, wherein a space shuttle crew went to rendezvous with the Soviet Cosmos shuttle, launched in 1963. They discovered that the satellite was in fact a modified Vostok designed to deliver a nuclear payload. So the cosmonaut aboard died when his life support system was exhausted following a launch into a higher than planned orbit. So it became inspiration for this whole Operation Zodiac thing. And in July 1987, issue 123 of Dragon magazine as well features the article Operation Zondraker Part 2, also by Rasmussen, which includes the scenario codenamed Starfall, wherein a team of agents explores the site of a failed Luna 15 lander, discovering that it was a crewed mission with 2 cosmonauts. One died instantly in the crash, identified as Nikolai L. Kuzmin, while the other unidentified cosmonaut died later as his oxygen supply ran out. So it's starting to become like a inspiration for these articles. So in 1989, the installment of Phillips Bond's Wired World published the UK comics anthology magazine, Deadline Magazine, which features a cosmonaut who crash lands in London Park, where the main characters are picnicking. And also we got Victor Pelevin's anti-Soviet 1992 novel Amun Ra, which is based on the depictions of Soviet space flights as planned homicide. Some of these flights are also not really flights, but fakes and for the sake of Soviet propaganda, as we mentioned earlier in this episode. So, moving on to the 2004 video game Metal Gear Solid 3, Space Eater, which has a boss known as the Fury, who was a cosmonaut sent to space before Gagarin, whose shuttle was engulfed in flames upon re-entry, and he survived with severe burns and a newly found sense of pyromania. So his boss fight consequently involves the use of fire, yada yada. And also the 2005 mockumentary, First in the Moon, describes the preparations and training for the Soviet moonshot in 1938, as well as following cover-up. In 2007, Jed Mercurio, the Jed Mercurio novel Ascent, features a cosmonaut who makes successful, albeit suicidal, moon landing ahead of the Apollo landings. 2010, the Canadian band Wolf Parade released a song titled Yulia, which the singer Dan Bochner confirmed in an interview was recounting a lost cosmonaut. In the 2010 video game No More Heroes 2, Travis Touchdown duels with Captain Vladimir, a ghostly cosmonaut with telekinetic powers who commands a laser-firing satellite named Volk. The 2011 sci-fi horror film Apollo 18, which depicts a secret lunar mission by NASA in 1974, depicts astronauts discovering a Soviet cosmonaut who was killed by spider-like aliens hidden in the moon, along with an LK lander. Michael Kasut's book Red Moon features a cosmonaut named Shibarin who flew on 2 space flights. One in the early Lost Cosmonaut stories of an ill-fated suborbital mission in 1958, prior to Gagarin's flight supposedly crewed by Serenti Shibarin, thus ending the story of the Lost Cosmonauts. So what are we thinking so far?
Don't we love how our video games want to take from things like that just to give it a story of its own?
Mm-hmm. So, what do you think? Did the Soviet Union really did send out, like, cover up a bunch of cosmonauts' deaths that failed?
Oh, I have no doubt they probably covered up several deaths that failed trying to go to space before anyone else.
Yeah, I wouldn't think that would be beyond the realm of possibility. Because the Soviet Union has been known to do really drastic things for the sake of propaganda or looking good in the eyes of the world, especially against the Americans. So I would say it wouldn't be outside the realm of possibility that the Soviet Union would do such a thing.
Yeah, I wouldn't put it past them.
Mm-hmm. So, what do you think about what do you think about this whole story that we just went through together?
It's interesting. It kind of gives you wanting to try back for going for space again, to the final frontier.
The final frontier, go where no man has gone before.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was the Lost Cosmonauts. That was a very interesting romp through the space race and history. So yeah, there's a lot of circumstantial evidence that was been proposed, mostly through just stories with no sources and unverified recordings of various things. Who knows? It's really just, we don't know for sure, but it's really just a matter of opinion that these cosmonauts were killed on mission. So yeah, I've been Nathaniel Avila.
And I'm Hanya.
And we'll talk to you guys later. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to a Vision podcast, home of wacky talkies, The Kingdom, Evil Exists, and many more.